The Arizona sun blazed mercilessly overhead, a blinding, unrelenting eye in a sky bleached pale by heat. It didn't blink. It didn't forgive. It simply burned, a relentless tyrant watching over a land where even hope withered faster than water spilled on desert sand. Red dust devils twisted and spun like ghostly dancers across the barren plains. The wind carried nothing but grit and the bitter, metallic taste of alkali. A constant reminder that this territory was as hostile as it was vast. Clara Whitmore stood on the creaking porch of her lonely ranch house, one hand shading her eyes as she scanned the endless stretch of her land. The property sprawled for miles, pushing up against the copper-rich hills, their surfaces gleaming in the dying light like old blood, dark and sinister, as though they'd witnessed countless violent secrets. 5,000 acres of scrub brush, canyons, and, beneath it all, the most coveted copper deposits outside of Bisbee. This land was Clara's, now hers alone, but it felt as heavy as a noose around her neck. Her late husband, Thomas Whitmore, had been both clever and stubborn. Clever enough to claim this land before the mining companies swarmed in like vultures, and stubborn enough to defend it until his final breath. Consumption had taken him last winter, leaving Clara a widow at just 27. Though still young, the desert had already begun to carve its signature on her. Fine lines crept around her sharp green eyes, and the relentless sun had streaked her dark hair with faded auburn highlights. Her hands, once soft and delicate back in street Louis, were now calloused and strong, shaped by years of survival in a land that tested every living thing. The Arizona Territory didn't just harden people, it baked them in a merciless kiln until only the toughest, most unbreakable core remained. Clara was no exception. A distant sound broke the oppressive silence, the rhythmic thud of hooves pounding against dry earth. Clara stiffened instantly. Visitors were rare out here, and rarely brought anything good. Her hand slid to the Winchester rifle propped casually against the doorframe, her movements instinctive and sharp. Out here, being ready for danger was as natural as breathing. The shimmer of heat on the horizon parted to reveal 3 riders. Their horses were lathered with sweat and dust, straining beneath the desert's weight. Clara's keen eyes quickly recognized 2 of them. Judge James Whelan, wearing a black coat absurdly heavy for the suffocating heat, a deliberate display of his authority. Beside him rode Sheriff Boyd, a stocky man with a grin set to his jaw. The third man, Clara didn't recognize him. He sat unnervingly still in his saddle, his hands bound tightly in front of him. Even at a distance, Clara could sense a coiled danger about him, like a rattlesnake hidden in shadow. "Mrs. Whitmore," Judge Whelan called out, raising a hand to tip his hat. Sweat streaked down his flushed face, soaking his collar. His tone carried forced politeness, but Clara could hear the strain beneath it. "I apologize for the intrusion." Clara didn't move from her position at the doorway. Her voice was cool, guarded. "Judge, Sheriff, what business brings you all the way out here?" The judge groaned as he dismounted heavily, his boots sinking slightly into the parched earth. His movements were those of a man unaccustomed to long rides. "Official business," he announced. His tone tried for gravitas but came out weary. "This here is Jesse Kane." He gestured to the bound man on horseback. "You've surely heard of the new territorial statute regarding prison labor?" Clara's jaw tightened. Yes, she'd heard. Everyone had. It was the latest so-called solution from a territory drowning in lawlessness. Instead of hanging convicted men, they were now bound to landowners for a set term of hard labor. A noble idea, on paper, meant to be about reform. But to Clara, it looked like something far darker, like slavery with legal paperwork. "I have no need for convict labor," she said coldly, her grip on the rifle tightening. The judge dabbed at his sweaty brow with a stained yellow handkerchief. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're running this spread alone. 5,000 acres is too much for one woman, no matter how determined. The territory believes you could benefit from assistance." Clara's voice was icy, each word deliberate. "Does the territory believe that, Judge? Or the Copper Creek Mining Company that's been pestering me to sell my land for 6 months?" For a moment, a shadow crossed Judge Whelan's face. His jaw clenched. "That's a dangerous accusation, ma'am." "Is it?" Clara's fingers curled tightly around the rifle stock. Her gaze never wavered. "Tell me, Judge, how much did Morrison offer you to saddle me with a criminal, hoping I'll scare easy and sell cheap?" The prisoner, Jesse Kane, laughed suddenly. A sharp, bitter sound that cut through the tension like a knife. "Lady's got you figured out." "Shut your mouth, convict," Sheriff Boyd barked, his hand twitching toward his holster. But Clara had caught something in Jesse's dark, storm-gray eyes. Not mockery. Something else. Something dangerously close to respect. Judge Whelan cleared his throat and straightened his coat, his composure visibly rattled. "Regardless of your suspicions, Mrs. Whitmore, the fact remains. Mr. Kane here has been legally bound to 6 months of labor on your property. His only other choice is hanging. Murderers don't get leniency." Clara's eyes snapped to Jesse Kane, really seeing him for the first time. He was perhaps 30, lean and weathered from a life spent outdoors. His coal-black hair fell slightly over a scar that cut a jagged line from his left eyebrow to his jaw. Those storm-gray eyes were sharp, calculating, dangerous. Even tied and surrounded, there was a wildness to him, coiled and waiting, like a rattlesnake poised to strike. "Murder," Clara repeated slowly. "Who did he kill?" "Sam Morrison," the sheriff replied grimly. "Shot him dead. In his own house." Clara's eyebrows shot up. Sam Morrison, the same man who owned Copper Creek Mining, the man who'd been trying to pressure her into selling her land. "And why?" she asked carefully. "Did you kill him, Mr. Kane?" Jesse met her gaze, unflinching. His voice was low, rough, and unsettlingly calm. "That's between me and the devil, ma'am." A distant rumble rolled across the horizon, though there wasn't a single cloud in sight. Clara's sharp instincts prickled desert storms could rise without warning, sudden and violent, turning dry riverbeds into raging torrents in mere minutes. The air already felt heavier, charged with electricity. "I won't have a killer on my land," Clara declared. "Then he hangs tomorrow," Judge Whelan said simply, his tone almost indifferent. "The choice is yours, Mrs. Whitmore. But consider this. You take him. You get 6 months of free labor. Strong back, good with horses, knows cattle. And if he so much as twitches wrong," the judge's eyes narrowed, "you shoot him like a rabid dog. That's the law." The wind surged suddenly, whipping up swirls of red dust around them, as if the land itself were restless. Clara's gaze darted toward her empty corrals, the sagging fences in desperate need of repair, the shallow well that would soon run dry under summer's brutal heat. Thomas, her late husband, would have taken the deal without hesitation. He'd been practical like that. Her voice was sharp as a blade. "What assurance do I have that he won't slit my throat while I sleep?" Jesse Kane finally spoke, his voice steady. "My word." A pause. "For whatever that's worth to you." Clara let out a humorless, cutting laugh. "The word of a killer. The word of a man who pays his debts," Jesse corrected, eyes locked on hers. 6 months of labor in exchange for my life. I'll work this land, fix what needs fixing. After that, we're square." Judge Whelan pulled a stack of official-looking papers from his saddlebag, shaking them out with a snap. "You'll need to sign these. It's all legal. For the next 6 months, Jesse Kane is property of the territory and bound to you." He gave her a pointed look. "If he tries to run, you shoot him. If he threatens you, you shoot him. That's the law." Another crack of thunder split the horizon. This one sounded closer, sharper. Clara's sharp eyes caught sight of a wall of storm clouds, gray and towering, rolling across the desert with terrifying speed. The temperature plummeted, the oppressive heat breaking into a charged chill. Her mind spun. Images tumbled together, the smug faces of mining company men who'd come by last month, gently, suggesting that a widow couldn't possibly manage a spread this size. The banker's patronizing question about whether she'd considered remarrying for her own protection. All of it designed to push her off her land. Her lips thinned. "No more." "Fine," she said abruptly, voice cutting through the wind. "Cut him loose." Sheriff Boyd's eyes went wide. "Mrs. Whitmore, I don't think—" "I wasn't asking for your opinion, Sheriff. she interrupted, cold steel in her tone. I said cut him loose. The sheriff's gaze flicked to Whelan, who hesitated, then gave a tight nod. With visible reluctance, Boyd dismounted and sliced through the rough rope binding Jesse's wrists. The convict rubbed at the angry red marks, his face unreadable, though Clara noticed how he didn't so much as glance toward the open desert. Where do I bunk? Jesse asked simply, his voice carrying easily over the rising wind. Clara gestured sharply with her rifle toward the weathered barn. Horse stalls are there, hay in the loft. There's a pump out back for water. Whelan's eyebrows rose. You're not letting him stay in the house. Clara's answering laugh was sharp, almost bitter. Would you? She didn't wait for a response. He's labor, not a guest. Suit yourself, Jesse said with a shrug. He swung easily down from his horse, moving with the quiet grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the saddle. I've slept in worse. The first fat raindrops splashed against the dust, leaving dark craters. Judge Whelan scrambled back onto his horse, clearly eager to escape before the storm unleashed its full fury. 6 months, Mrs. Whitmore, he reminded her. Starting today. I'll send someone to check on things in a few weeks. You do that, Clara said coolly. The 3 men rode off just as the sky split open, releasing a torrent of rain that transformed the yard to sucking mud within moments. Clara remained on the porch, dry beneath the overhang, watching Jesse Kane stand perfectly still in the downpour. Rain streamed from the brim of his hat, his shirt clinging to his lean frame. He made no move toward shelter. Well? Clara finally called over the drumming rain. Planning to stand there until you drown? He tilted his head up, gray eyes locking on hers. For the briefest moment, she caught an expression she couldn't name. Surprise, perhaps, or something softer. Just enjoying the rain, ma'am, he said quietly. Been a long time since I felt it. How long were you locked up? She asked before she could stop herself. 3 months, waiting for trial, he said after a pause. And before that, his voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken memories. Rain ran down his face like tears, long enough to forget what freedom feels like. Despite herself, Clara felt a pang, a tiny twist of something dangerously close to sympathy. She shoved it down hard. This was business, nothing more. Barn's that way, she said curtly. I expect you working at sunup. Yes, ma'am. She turned to go inside, then paused, her voice snapping through the rain like a whip. Kane. He glanced up. You try anything, and I mean anything, and I'll put a bullet in you myself. Clear? For the first time, he smiled, though it was faint and haunted. Crystal clear, Mrs. Whitmore. Clara slammed the door behind her and slid the heavy bar into place. Through a window, she watched him lead his horse to the barn. Even in the violent weather, he moved without haste, without fear. His calm, unsettling her more than outright rebellion ever could. Most men in his position would rage, scheme, plan their escape. Jesse Kane simply did as he was told. Like a man who'd learned the hard way that fighting fate only brought more pain. Clara checked the Winchester, reloaded the Colt revolver she kept in her bedroom, and sat on the edge of her bed, listening to the storm rip the night apart. Lightning split the sky, turning the desert briefly white as bone. Thunder rattled the windows, wild and unpredictable, much like the man now sleeping in her barn. No, she corrected herself sharply. Not sleeping. Waiting. Watching. Dangerous. The rooster crowed before dawn, but Clara was already awake, lying stiff and tense beneath the thin quilt. She'd barely slept, ears straining all night for the slightest sound of danger. By the time the first pale light crept through the curtains, she was dressed in her work clothes, hair braided tightly, boots laced. Through the window, she scanned the yard. The barn door was open, but no sign of Jesse Kane. Perhaps he'd fled in the night, she thought, a mix of relief and disappointment twisting in her gut. Relief because the threat would be gone. Disappointment because she'd have to face Judge Whelan's smug certainty that a woman couldn't manage such arrangements. She grabbed her Winchester and stepped onto the porch only to stop short. Jesse was already at work. He'd found the broken fence posts she'd been meaning to fix for weeks and was digging fresh holes. His shirt clung to him with sweat despite the cool morning, muscles flexing smoothly as he worked with a precision that spoke of long experience. He glanced up briefly at her approach, but didn't stop. "Ma'am, there's coffee on the stove," she said stiffly, "and biscuits left from yesterday." "I'm fine," he replied without looking up. Clara frowned. "You need to eat if you're going to work." "I said I'm fine." He drove the post-hole digger deep into the rocky soil, his movements unhurried yet efficient. Clara watched for a moment, torn between irritation at his stubbornness and an unwilling admiration for his skill. "Suit yourself," she said at last. "When you're done here, the chicken coop needs repair. Something's been getting at the hens, probably a coyote." "I'll take care of it." She turned to go, then hesitated. "How did you know about the fence posts?" Jesse finally paused, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his arm. "Walked the property line before sunup. Figured I should know what needs doing." "In the dark?" Moon was bright enough. He returned to his work, his voice calm, almost matter-of-fact. "That wash to the north's going to be trouble come monsoon season. Erosion's eating away at the bank, and your well's showing signs of going dry. Probably need to dig a new one before summer." Clara blinked, startled. She'd expected defiance, maybe sullenness, not competence. "You seem to know a lot about ranching," she said cautiously. "For a killer." His hands stilled on the digger. "I wasn't always a killer, Mrs. Whitmore." The words hung between them, heavy and unsettling. Clara opened her mouth to ask what he'd been before, then shut it quickly. Asking would imply an interest she wasn't ready to admit. Instead, she turned sharply and stalked back to the house, her heartbeat oddly unsteady. By midday, the sun had turned merciless, climbing past 90 degrees and baking the ground until the air itself shimmered. Clara sat beneath the narrow strip of shade on the porch, mending harnesses. Sweat rolled down her spine, the rhythm of her work steady, almost meditative, until the unmistakable sound of galloping hooves shattered the fragile calm. This wasn't the measured trot of a lone traveler. This was many riders, coming fast. Clara's blood ran cold. She dropped the leather strap and snatched up her Winchester, every nerve on edge. 6 men crested the rise in a blur of dust and heat waves. At their head rode Jake Sullivan of the Double Bar Ranch, a man Clara despised with every fiber of her being. Where Thomas, her late husband, had been quiet strength and integrity, Sullivan was all bluster and hunger. Loud, crude, with greedy hands and a smile that never reached his calculating eyes. Since Thomas's funeral, he'd been circling like a vulture, making offers on her land that grew uglier with each refusal. "Afternoon, Clara," he called, his voice falsely jovial as his spurs jingled. He didn't wait for permission to use her first name. A calculated insult. Behind him, his men fanned out across the yard, a movement that looked casual to anyone blind to the danger. Clara wasn't blind. They were positioning themselves, ready to strike. Her hands tightened on the rifle, the barrel glinting in the sunday. "State your business, Sullivan," she said flatly. He swung down from his horse, swaggering closer. The smell of whiskey reached her even at a distance, sharp and sour. "Word travels fast," he drawled. "Heard you took in that murderer, Kane." Clara's spine stiffened, but she kept her face neutral. "And what of it? Folks are concerned." Sullivan's voice oozed false concern. "A woman alone with a dangerous criminal? Why, it just ain't proper." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Since when have you cared about what's proper, Jake?" His smile faltered, then hardened. "Now, that ain't friendly," he said, taking a step closer. "I'm just looking out for your welfare." One of his men drifted casually toward the barn. Clara's voice snapped like a whip. "Tell your man to stay clear of my property." Sullivan's grin turned sharp and wolfish. "Or what? You'll shoot him?" His voice dropped to a sneer. "You couldn't even keep your own husband alive." The words struck like a physical blow. Clara's vision blurred for a heartbeat, rage and grief tangling together until she thought she might choke. But before she could speak, Jesse Kane stepped out of the barn. He moved with unhurried calm, a hammer loose in his hand. Something in his very presence shifted the balance of power. Sullivan's man backed away, eyes wide. as though Jesse carried the storm with him. "Mrs. Whitmore," Jesse said quietly, his voice low and even. "That coyote won't be bothering your chickens anymore." Sullivan's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing to slits. Well, the killer himself. Heard you shot Sam Morrison in cold blood." Jesse's storm-gray gaze flicked briefly to Sullivan, then dismissed him entirely, as though he weren't worth the effort. "Mrs. Whitmore," Jesse said, deliberately turning his back on Sullivan. "You want me to fix that gate next? Or should I start on the well?" The deliberate slight made Sullivan's face turn a dangerous shade of red. "I'm talking to you, convict," he spat. "No," Jesse replied calmly. "You're trespassing on Mrs. Whitmore's land. I work for her, not for you." Sullivan's hand dropped to the butt of his revolver. "You got a mouth on you, boy." Clara stepped between them, her rifle already raised. "Jake," she said, her voice cutting through the heat like ice, "you and your men have 30 seconds to get off my property." "You're making a mistake, Clara," he warned. "This ain't going to end well." 20 seconds, she said without blinking. For a moment, Sullivan's calculating mind weighed the odds. 6 armed men against a woman and a convict. But the woman had a rifle aimed steady as a rock, and the convict beside her stood unnervingly still, like violence waiting to explode. Sullivan spat in the dust. "This ain't over." He mounted his horse with exaggerated slowness. "You can't hold this land forever, Clara. Not alone. Not with just some murderer for protection." The men wheeled their horses and rode off in a cloud of red dust. Clara kept her rifle trained on them until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did she realize her hands were trembling. "You all right?" Jesse asked quietly. She spun on him, anger and adrenaline sparking hot. "Don't do that again," she snapped. "Don't make decisions for me. This is my land, my fight." Jesse studied her for a long moment, unreadable. Then he nodded once. "Yes, ma'am," he said simply. "Though if I might say, you might not have enough." She cut him off sharply. He nodded again and turned back toward the barn, his calm infuriating her even more. Clara watched him go, fury warring with something far more dangerous relief. She'd handled Jake Sullivan before and would do so again. She didn't need anyone's protection, but she couldn't deny the way her heart had steadied when Jesse appeared, or how Sullivan's men had instinctively backed away from him, like spooked horses sensing a predator. That evening, Clara carried a plate of food to the barn. Jesse sat on a hay bale, oiling a piece of leather by lamplight. He looked up, startled. "Can't have you collapsing from hunger," she said brusquely, setting the plate on a nearby barrel. "Dead men don't fix fences." His mouth quirked slightly. "Much obliged." She turned to leave, then hesitated. "Sullivan won't let this go. He wants my land badly, and he's got the men to take it if he decides the law's too slow." Jesse set down the leather carefully. "I know his type." "Do you?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Is that why you killed Morrison? Because you knew his type?" Jesse was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his jaw tightened. Morrison liked to hurt women. The kind who couldn't fight back, saloon girls, Indian women, Mexican girls from the border towns. His voice dropped to a raw whisper. "My sister." Clara's breath caught. "Your sister?" "She worked in his house," Jesse said, his tone flat and deadly. "Cooking, cleaning. She was 17. His hands stilled, curling into fists. "When I found her, she'd tried to lie about it, to protect me. Took her 3 days to die." The barn was utterly silent, save for the restless shifting of the horses in their stalls. Clara's stomach twisted. She thought of Sam Morrison's smooth manners, his polite nods when they'd crossed paths in town. "So, you killed him," she said softly. Jesse met her gaze, his storm-gray eyes filled with unflinching truth. "So I killed him. And I'd do it again, knowing it would lead me here." There was no boast in his words, only cold, undeniable fact. Clara believed him, and that terrified her more than the crime itself. "Eat your supper," she said roughly, fleeing back to the house before he could see the confusion on her face. But later, lying awake in the dark, Clara couldn't banish the image of a 17-year-old girl and the man who'd destroyed her. And she couldn't forget the haunted pain in Jesse Kane's voice. The following days slipped into a tense rhythm. Jesse worked from dawn to dusk without complaint, moving with quiet efficiency as he tackled every chore that Thomas had neglected in his illness, and many Clara hadn't even realized needed doing. He rehung the heavy barn doors so they no longer stuck, patched the leaking roof where rain had been seeping in unnoticed, dug deep irrigation ditches to redirect the sudden floods of monsoon season. Everywhere Clara looked, she saw evidence of his hands, his labor, his skill. And the town noticed, too. Oh, how they noticed. When Clara drove her wagon into town for supplies, she felt the shift immediately. Women who'd once greeted her warmly now turned their backs, whispering in tight little clusters. The air crackled with unspoken judgment. As she passed, fragments of gossip reached her ears like poisoned arrows. Keeping that killer like a pet. It ain't decent. Maybe she's lonely. You know how widows get. The words stung, though Clara held her head high, making her purchases with cool dignity. But the whispers followed her home like circling vultures, gnawing at her resolve. That evening, she found Jesse by the newly repaired chicken coop. He leaned casually against the fence, watching the hens scratch in the dirt. For the first time, Clara saw a faint half-smile curve his lips. "Something funny about chickens?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. He glanced at her, the smile deepening slightly. "Just remembering. We had chickens when I was a boy. My sister named every one of them. Cried for a week the first time Ma wrung one's neck for Sunday dinner. It was the most personal thing he'd shared since arriving." Clara surprised herself by settling on a nearby stump, drawn in despite herself. "Where was this?" "Kansas," he said, voice softening. "Little farm outside Topeka. Lost it when I was 12 drought, then the bank." He shrugged, as if that summed up the cruelty of the world. "We headed west after that. Pa died in a mining accident in Colorado. Ma followed 2 years later. They called it lung fever, but I think it was heartbreak." "And your sister?" Clara prompted gently. "I tried to take care of her," Jesse said, his jaw tightening. "Did what work I could, but a 16-year-old boy doesn't have many options, and a pretty girl alone." His voice broke, rough with guilt. She had fewer good ones. Clara's heart ached at the unspoken tragedy. "You were just a child yourself," she said softly. His eyes were bleak in the fading light. "Maybe. But I should have done better by her." Before she could respond, he abruptly straightened. "I'll check the fence line before dark." Clara watched him walk away, his silhouette dark against the reddening sky. A killer, she reminded herself fiercely. But the word was losing its sharp edges, tangled now with his competence, his quiet grief, the gentleness she'd glimpsed when he handled her animals. That night, a steady rain rolled in, drumming on the roof and turning the yard to mud. Clara made extra coffee, and after a long inner debate, carried a steaming cup to the barn. Jesse was up in the loft, shifting hay to cover spots where the patched roof still leaked. "Coffee," she called up, her tone brusque to hide her nerves. "If you want it." He appeared at the ladder, shirt damp with rain and sweat. As he climbed down, Clara forced herself to stay calm. "You don't need to," she began. "Just take the coffee, Kane," she interrupted herself. "Lord knows you've earned it." Their fingers brushed as he accepted the cup, sending a jolt through her that she immediately regretted. She jerked back, nearly spilling her own coffee. "Sorry," they both muttered at the same time, then fell into an awkward silence. Jesse took a sip, closing his eyes briefly in appreciation. "Been a long time since I've had coffee this good." "It's nothing special," she said, flustered. "It is to me." They stood there, the barn filled with the soft patter of rain, neither quite looking at the other. Clara was painfully aware of his presence, the heat of him, the way he seemed to fill the small space without trying. The lamplight cast his face in warm gold, softening the harsh lines and deepening the shadows of his scar. "I should go," she said abruptly, turning toward the door. "Mrs. Whitmore." His voice stopped her mid-step. "Thank you for the coffee," he said, then gestured vaguely. his usual composure cracking for a moment, "for not being what I expected." "What did you expect?" she asked before she could stop herself. He met her gaze, and something dangerous flickered in his storm-gray eyes. Fear. Hatred. The way most folks look at men like me. Clara swallowed hard. "I am afraid," she admitted softly. "Just not of what you might think." Before he could respond, she fled into the rain, running for the house with her heart pounding. Inside her kitchen, Clara stood dripping on the floor, cursing herself for a fool. She'd seen the way Jesse looked at her, and she knew God help her. She knew that she'd been looking back in the same way when she thought he wasn't watching. It was loneliness, she told herself desperately. Nothing more. Two people, isolated and battered by circumstance, drawn together like streams converging in the desert. But knowing the truth didn't stop her from replaying the brush of his fingers, the rough tenderness in his voice. It didn't stop her from wondering what those hands would feel like on her skin, what his voice would sound like speaking her given name. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to block out the traitorous thoughts. This was madness. He was her prisoner, bound to her by law, not choice. Whatever feelings she thought she saw in his eyes, it couldn't be trusted. Nothing between them could be trusted. But when Clara finally drifted into sleep, she dreamed of endless wheat fields under a Kansas sky, of a boy struggling to protect his sister, and of griefs that weren't hers yet somehow felt like they belonged to her heart. 3 weeks passed, and under Jesse's tireless hands, the ranch transformed. Fences stood straight and sturdy. The irrigation ditches flowed clear. The new well Jesse dug struck water at 30 feet, sweet and cold even under the growing heat of summer. Clara's cattle grew sleek and fat on improved pastures. Even the stubborn old milk cow seemed less ornery. The town took notice. When Clara drove her wagon in, people stared openly. Men muttered in surprise at the quality of goods she brought to trade. A few even asked, roundabout, if her hired man might be available to help on their properties. "He's bound to me for 6 months," Clara replied coolly. "After that, you can ask him yourself." But the thought of "after that" sent an unexpected pang through her. She didn't like imagining the ranch or her life without Jesse's steady presence. One particular morning, Clara was tending her small garden when she heard horses approaching. She straightened, hand going automatically to the pistol now holstered at her hip. Jesse's suggestion, and a good one. But it wasn't Sullivan this time. It was Martin Wheeler, the slick, well-dressed legal representative of the Copper Creek Mining Company. 2 unknown men flanked him like silent shadows. Wheeler dismounted with practiced elegance, sweeping off his hat. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're looking radiant as always." "Mr. Wheeler," Clara replied coolly, not rising from her crouch among the bean plants. "What brings you here? Can't a man pay a social call on a beautiful woman?" His smile was all polished charm, and as false as a snake's hiss. "Not you," she said, flatly. "Not here. Direct as always." Wheeler chuckled. "Very well. I've come with a new offer from my employers." Clara's stomach tightened. "They are prepared to pay $15,000 for your property. Cash. Today." Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. $15,000. It was more money than she'd ever seen, more than she could imagine earning in a lifetime of cattle and crops. With that kind of money, she could start over anywhere, live comfortably for years, leave this brutal land and all its ghosts behind. "That's triple your last offer," she said slowly, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Wheeler's smile was smooth, almost oily. "My employers are eager to expand their operations, and frankly, Mrs. Whitmore, they're concerned about your situation." His gaze flicked meaningfully toward the barn. "A woman alone," he continued, lowering his voice to a tone of mock sympathy. "Forced to rely on convict labor. It's unseemly, dangerous even." Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm managing just fine." "Are you?" His tone dripped false pity. "Because the town talks. About you. About Kane." His eyes gleamed as he delivered the poison. "About what might be happening out here, away from proper supervision." Heat flared in Clara's cheeks, anger, humiliation, fury. How dare you? She hissed. I'm only reporting what others say. Wheeler replied smoothly, holding up his hands in mock innocence. My employers worry for your reputation as much as your safety. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper meant to wound. $15,000, Mrs. Whitmore. You could leave this place. Return east. Start fresh, where no one knows your circumstances. Clara's eyes were ice. My circumstances are that I own this land free and clear, she said coldly. And I am not selling, not for 15,000, not for 50. For the first time, Wheeler's mask slipped. Annoyance flickered in his carefully polished expression. You're being foolish, he snapped, then smoothed his tone again. My employers have been patient, but patience has limits. Is that a threat? Clara asked, her voice sharp as a blade. An observation, Wheeler said with a tight smile. The offer stands for 1 week. After that, he shrugged, leaving the rest unspoken. As he remounted, movement behind him caught Clara's eye. Jesse was walking back from the new well, shirt off, his skin slick with sweat and glistening water. He'd clearly been cooling himself after hours of grueling labor. The sight of him, broad shoulders marked with old scars, muscles shifting under sun-browned skin, made Wheeler's men exchange knowing, cruel looks. Clara's cheeks burned hotter, for reasons she refused to examine. Jesse's storm-gray gaze swept the scene in a heartbeat, his stance subtly shifting as he moved closer to Clara. Not quite beside her, but near enough to make his presence clear. Gentlemen, Jesse said, his voice low and steady. Something I can help you with? Wheeler's lip curled in disdain. Just leaving. Convict. Though if I were you, I'd be careful. His tone turned cutting. The territory is very particular about prisoners who overstep their bounds. Jesse's face was unreadable. I'll keep that in mind. But something in his posture made Wheeler's men uneasy. One shifted in his saddle, as though ready to bolt. Clara kept her head high, though inside her pulse thundered. As Wheeler rode off, Clara realized she was trembling with rage, with fear of what that 1 week might bring, and with something far more dangerous whenever she looked at Jesse. You all right? Jesse asked quietly, the same way he'd asked after Sullivan's visit. Stop asking me that, she snapped, more harshly than intended. She turned on him, furious at herself, at Wheeler, at everything. And put your shirt on, for heaven's sake. Jesse blinked, then glanced down at himself, as if only now realizing his state of undress. Didn't know we had company, he muttered. It's not about them. Just, Clara cut herself off, shaking her head. Just put it on. She stomped back toward the house, refusing to look back. Behind her, she thought she heard him mutter something that might have been, yes, ma'am, or maybe something else entirely. That evening, Clara couldn't settle. She tried mending harnesses, reading the faded newspaper, balancing account books. Nothing worked. Her thoughts spun in relentless circles. Wheeler's threat, Sullivan's anger, Jesse's steady presence. Finally, she gave up and stepped outside. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of sage. Then she heard it. Music. The mournful sound of a harmonica drifted from the barn, haunting and beautiful. A melody, heavy with longing and loss, wrapping around Clara's heart like a ghostly embrace. She found herself walking toward it, drawn as if by some unseen tether. Jesse sat outside the barn doors, back against the weathered wall, eyes closed as he played. When he sensed her presence, he lowered the instrument, his expression unreadable. Sorry if I disturbed you. You didn't, she said softly, taking a hesitant seat on a nearby hay bale. Not too close. I didn't know you played. Picked it up years back, Jesse said, turning the harmonica over in his rough hands. Helps pass the time. Used to play for my sister when she couldn't sleep. They sat in silence, stars slowly emerging above them, the desert night vast and endless. Finally, Clara broke the quiet. Wheeler offered $15,000 for the property today. Jesse gave a low whistle. That's a lot of money. It is, Clara admitted, picking at a loose thread on her skirt. Sometimes, I think maybe I should take it. Start over somewhere else. Somewhere people don't whisper behind their hands. Jessie studied her profile in the dim light. Is that what you want? She considered. Really considered. Then shook her head slowly. No. This is my home. Thomas and I built this together. I won't be driven off by gossip or threats. Then don't be, Jessie said simply. Easy for you to say, she snapped. You'll be gone in 5 months. His face shadowed, voice low. Yeah, he said finally. I will. Something in his tone made her heart lurch. She turned toward him sharply. Jessie, she began, startled to hear herself use his name for the first time. He looked at her, and suddenly the space between them seemed too wide and yet not nearly enough. Clara could smell the leather and clean sweat of him, could hear the rough cadence of his breathing. I should go inside, she whispered, though she didn't move. Probably should, he agreed, also not moving. The night wrapped around them, intimate and secret. Clara thought of Wheeler's insinuations, the town's poisonous gossip, the way they'd already painted her scarlet in their minds. Play something else, she said softly, breaking the spell. Something happier. Jessie lifted the harmonica again, and this time the melody was lighter, a dancing tune that conjured memories of barn raisings and harvest feasts, of laughter and joy Clara hadn't felt in years. Without realizing it, she swayed slightly to the rhythm, remembering a time when she'd been young and hopeful and believed the world was kind. When the song ended, she stood abruptly, heart pounding. Thank you. Good night, Jessie. Good night, Clara. Her name on his lips stopped her like a physical touch. She didn't correct him, didn't remind him of propriety. She simply fled to her house, her skin burning despite the cool night air. The next day brought the bloodshed. Clara woke to find 3 of her best cattle lying dead in the far pasture, shot clean through the head. Jessie found them first. His face was grim as he led her to the grisly scene. Professional work, he said, kneeling by one of the carcasses. Long rifle, probably fired from that ridge. He pointed to a distant rise. Someone who knows what they're doing. Sullivan, Clara whispered, her fists clenching. Or Wheeler's men. They're escalating, Jessie said, scanning the horizon. Testing to see how far you'll go. Clara's breath came fast and sharp. What can I do? I can't prove who did it. You could take the money, Jessie said carefully. Leave before this gets worse. Her head whipped around, fury blazing in her green eyes. Is that what you think I should do? Run? Let them win? I think, Jessie said evenly, though his jaw tightened. That $15,000 is better than a bullet in the dark. This land isn't just dirt and fences, Jessie, Clara snapped. It's my life, my history, my future, and it might get you killed. He shot back, his calm finally cracking. You can't fight a whole town alone. I'm not alone, she retorted. Then, softer, almost against her will. Not anymore. The words hung between them, dangerous and sweet, like the charged air before a storm. The rest of that day was consumed by grim work. Together, Clara and Jessie dragged the dead cattle to a distant pit and burned the carcasses to prevent disease. The air filled with the acrid stench of smoke and charred flesh, clinging to their skin, their clothes, their very souls. By the time they finished, both were filthy, exhausted, and streaked with soot. Clara's hair had fallen loose, sticking in damp strands to her flushed face. Jessie's shirt clung to his back, soaked through with sweat and ash. I'll bury the bones tomorrow, Jessie said quietly as they trudged toward the house and barn. We'll bury them, Clara corrected sharply. This is my ranch, my fight. He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression unreadable but intense. Clara, Mrs. Whitmore, you don't have to prove anything to me. I'm not trying to prove anything to you, she shot back. Aren't you? His voice was low, rough with restrained emotion. Every time I try to help, you push me away. Every time I show concern, you bristle like a cactus. What are you so afraid of? I'm not afraid, she hissed. You are, Jessie said, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming. You're afraid that if you let me in, if you let me really help, it means you need me. And you'd rather die than need anyone. The words struck like bullets, finding their mark. Clara's breath caught. "You don't know me," she whispered. "Don't I?" His hand hovered near her face, not quite touching. "I know you check on me every night before you bar your door, making sure I'm where I should be. I know you make extra coffee every morning, even though you pretend it's just for you. I know you watch me work when you think I don't notice." "Stop," she begged, trembling. "I know," he continued, voice low and fierce, "that you are the strongest woman I've ever met, and I know it's killing you inside to be thought weak." Her throat tightened painfully. "You care for me?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Jesse's thumb brushed lightly against her cheekbone, so faint she might have imagined it. "More than I should," he admitted hoarsely. "More than I have any right to." Clara's walls crumbled. She swayed toward him, drawn like dry earth to rain. "Jesse." A gunshot cracked through the evening air. Jesse reacted instantly, shoving Clara to the ground behind the water trough as another bullet shattered a fence post. He covered her with his body, shielding her from view. "The house," he ordered urgently. "When I say run, you run. Don't stop. Don't look back." "What about you?" she demanded, terrified. "I'll be right behind you." Another shot whined past, close enough that Clara felt the rush of displaced air. "Ready?" Jesse shouted. "No. Run." They sprinted, Jesse staying between Clara and the source of the gunfire. 2 more shots rang out. Clara's heart pounded in her ears as they dove through the open doorway. Jesse slammed the door and dropped the heavy bar into place. "Get down!" he barked, moving to the window with her Winchester. Clara scrambled to the gun cabinet, grabbing extra ammunition and her pistol. "Do you see them?" she gasped. "No," Jesse said grimly. "But they're up on the south ridge. Same spot as before." He fired once, the rifle's blast deafening in the enclosed space. "Warning shot. Let them know we're not helpless." They waited, tense and breathless, but no more shots came. As darkness fell, Jesse made a careful circuit of the windows, checking angles and sight lines. "I think they've gone," he said finally, though his tone was grim. They made their point. Clara slumped against the wall, adrenaline leaving her shaky and hollow. "First my cattle, now this," she whispered. "They're trying to scare me into selling." "Well, it's not working," Jesse growled. Clara reloaded her pistol, hands trembling. "I won't be driven off my land by cowards who shoot from shadows." Jesse crouched beside her, taking the pistol gently from her shaking fingers and finishing the task himself. "You could have been killed tonight," he said quietly. "So could you. That's different." "Why?" she demanded, anger flaring. "Because you're a man. Because you think you're expendable. Because I'm already dead," Jesse said flatly, meeting her gaze. "The territory just hasn't gotten around to burying me yet." Clara's breath hitched. "But you," he continued, his voice softening. "You have a future, a life ahead of you. You could go anywhere, be anything." "This is my life," Clara said fiercely. "This ranch, this land, it's all I have left of Thomas, of the dreams we built together." "Dreams can change," Jesse said, his eyes dark with meaning. "People can change." Her heart twisted painfully. "Have you changed?" "Every day since I met you." The confession hung between them, raw and unguarded. Clara's pulse thundered. She thought of that moment outside, before the shots, when she might have kissed him. "You should sleep in the house tonight," she blurted, "in case they come back. The settee in the parlor, it's comfortable enough." "Clara, I don't think." "Please," she interrupted, hating the vulnerability in her voice. "I know I push you away. I know I'm difficult. But I'm asking you. Stay." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. "All right, just tonight." But they both knew it wouldn't be just tonight. Something had shifted between them. A barrier cracked, a dam breaking slowly under mounting pressure. Later, as Clara brought blankets to the parlor, Jesse's voice stopped her. "Clara." She turned, startled by the raw emotion in his tone. "What you said earlier, about my place here. You're right. I am your prisoner. I have no right to feel what I feel." He swallowed hard. "If you want me to keep my distance, I will. Just say the word. Clara stared at him. This man who had killed for his sister's honor, who had shielded her from bullets without hesitation, who worked tirelessly under the merciless Sunday. I don't know what I want, she admitted, her voice trembling. I only know that when those shots came tonight, my first thought, it wasn't about the ranch, or the cattle, or even my own life. What was it about? Jesse asked, barely breathing. You, she whispered. Before he could respond, she fled to her room, terrified of what she'd just confessed and of what she hadn't said. But she left her bedroom door open a crack. Deep in the night, Clara heard Jesse moving quietly through the house, checking windows, standing guard, protecting her, even though she'd sworn she didn't need protection, caring for her, even though she'd insisted she didn't need care. Clara lay awake, hand pressed to her lips, and admitted the truth she'd been fighting since the day Jesse stood in her yard, rain streaming from his hat. She was falling in love with Jesse Kane. 3 days later, Clara woke feeling strangely heavy, her nightgown clinging damp with sweat. When she tried to sit up, the room tilted wildly, sending her crashing back to the pillows with a groan. Jesse appeared instantly in the doorway, his face etched with concern. He'd been sleeping in the parlor ever since that night, both of them pretending it was still about safety. Clara? He crossed the room in 2 strides, propriety forgotten. What's wrong? Just tired, she managed, though her voice came out thick and strange. He pressed a calloused hand to her forehead. Christ, you're burning up. He was gone and back in moments, carrying a basin of water and clean cloths. How long have you been feeling poorly? I'm fine, Clara insisted, trying to rise. There's work to be done. The work can wait, Jesse said firmly, gently pushing her back down. You can't. Clara tried to protest, but her limbs felt like lead. The world tilted sickeningly whenever she tried to rise. I don't have time to be sick, she muttered weakly, her voice breaking. You don't have a choice, Jesse said, his tone brooking no argument. You've been running yourself, ragged, not eating, not sleeping proper. Your body's had enough. He wrung out a cool cloth and laid it across her burning forehead. The blessed relief dragged a soft sigh from Clara's lips despite herself. When's the last time you ate a full meal? He asked sharply. Clara tried to think. The days since the shooting were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. I don't remember. Thought so, Jesse growled, frustration clear in his voice. Reckless woman. Clara's throat tightened at the gruff tenderness beneath his anger. I can handle it, she whispered, trying to push herself upright. He caught her gently but firmly, lowering her back to the pillows. No, Clara. You've been handling everything for too long. Now it's my turn. Her eyes fluttered shut, too weary to fight. He moved through her kitchen with a competence that startled her, preparing a bitter willow bark tea the way his mother once had. Soon, the sharp herbal scent filled the room. Can you sit up? Jesse asked, slipping an arm around her shoulders to help her. The room swayed, but steadied as she leaned against him, her head against his solid chest. Small sips now, he murmured, holding the cup to her lips. The tea was unpleasantly bitter, but soothing. Clara drank obediently, too weak to argue. That's it, Jesse said softly. Rest now. I've got you. The words wrapped around her like a blanket. She let her head rest against his shoulder, lulled by his steady breathing, his strength. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to stop fighting. Through fevered dreams, Clara drifted in and out of awareness. Sometimes she woke to find Jesse beside her, changing the cloths on her forehead, murmuring quiet reassurances. Once, she opened her eyes to see him reading her worn poetry book by lamplight. His rough features softened in concentration, looking almost boyish. You read? She croaked, her voice barely a whisper. He glanced up, startled, then smiled faintly. When I get the chance. My sister taught me letters. He touched the book carefully. This Whitman fellow, he sees the world true. Read to me, Clara murmured. Jesse hesitated, then began in his low, rumbling voice. I have perceived that to be with those I like is enough. To stop in company with the rest at evening is enough. To be surrounded by beautiful, curious, breathing, laughing flesh, is enough. The words washed over her, soothing as cool water. Clara drifted back to sleep, safer than she had felt in years. In the deepest hours of the night, Clara woke to find Jessie slumped in the chair beside her bed, head bowed in exhaustion. One hand rested near hers on the quilt as if he'd been guarding her even in sleep. Moonlight spilled across his face, softening the scar into a pale thread. For a moment, Clara simply watched him, her heart twisting painfully. Without thinking, she lifted trembling fingers, hovering just above his cheek. She didn't quite touch, but the yearning was there, undeniable. His eyes opened suddenly, alert as a hawk. They stared at each other in the silver light, the space between them electric with possibility. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. "Better," Clara whispered. "The fever's breaking." She became suddenly, painfully aware of her nightgown clinging to her damp skin. "You should go back to the parlor." "I should," Jessie agreed. But he didn't move. "Jessie," Clara began, her voice trembling. "I know this is wrong. You're a convict. I'm your employer. You're bound to me by law. I know all the reasons, Clara." His voice cracked like a whip. "When I saw you lying there, burning with fever, helpless," he broke off, fists clenching. "I wanted to tear the world apart to fix it. I wanted to carry you somewhere safe, somewhere they couldn't touch you." Her breath caught. "What did you want, Jessie?" she whispered. He looked at her then with naked longing. "Everything I can't have." The confession burned between them like a live coal. Clara's carefully built walls crumbled. "Jessie," she breathed. And this time his name was an invitation. He rose from the chair, sitting on the edge of the bed. His rough, work-worn hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You're still feverish," he murmured, not thinking clear. "I've never thought clearer," she said fiercely, turning her face into his palm. "I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of being proper. Tired of denying what's between us. Clara." She silenced him by pressing her lips to his palm. Jessie made a sound like a man struck by lightning, his whole body going rigid. "Please," she whispered against his skin. "I've been alone so long." That broke him. He bent and kissed her, hesitant at first, as though she might shatter. But Clara was done with gentle lies. She twined her fingers in his hair, pulling him closer, pouring months of loneliness and longing into the kiss. Jessie's control snapped. His hands roamed her back, her waist, the thin fabric of her nightgown. His kiss deepened, rough and consuming. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing raggedly. Jessie rested his forehead against hers, trembling. "This changes everything," he said hoarsely. "I know," Clara whispered. Her heart thundered. "The town already talks. If they knew, let them talk." Recklessness surged through her like wildfire. "They've already condemned me. At least now it would be for the truth." Jessie searched her face, tortured and hopeful all at once. "Is this rebellion, Clara? Against their judgment?" "No." She grabbed his hand, pressing it to her racing heart. "This is me, choosing something for myself. Choosing you. You don't know what you're choosing," Jessie warned, voice raw. "I'm a killer. I've got blood on my hands that won't wash clean." "You killed a monster to avenge your sister," Clara said fiercely. "That's not murder. That's justice. The law doesn't see the difference," he said bitterly. "The law bound me to you. Should I trust it on one count, but not the other?" He had no answer for that. Only silence and the ragged sound of their breathing. Clara sat up, ignoring the dizziness. "If you don't want this, don't want me, then go. But don't stay out of duty." "Duty?" Jessie laughed, harsh and low. "Clara, duty is the last thing I feel when I look at you." "Then what do you feel?" she demanded. Instead of answering with words, Jessie kissed her again, this time with certainty, with hunger. His hands tangled in her damp hair as Clara arched against him, feeling alive for the first time since Thomas's death. When he lowered her back to the pillows, she pulled him down with her, neither willing to let go. Afterward, they lay facing each other, breath mingling in the dark. I've wanted this since that first night, Jesse admitted quietly. You, standing there with your rifle in the storm, fierce as any warrior. I thought I was dreaming. You were infuriating, Clara said, though she was smiling. So calm, like you'd already accepted whatever came. I had. His eyes darkened. Until you gave me work to do. Purpose. A reason to fight again. Clara traced the scar on his face with gentle fingers. How did you get this? Bar fight in Tucson, Jesse said with a shrug. Man insulted a woman I was with. Called her things I won't repeat. I took exception. Always defending women's honor. Clara murmured. Only when they can't defend themselves, Jesse replied. His hand covered hers. You've never needed defending, Clara. You just needed someone to stand beside you. Her throat tightened. I need more than that, she whispered. What? He asked, voice husky. Tell me. But she couldn't find the words. Instead, she kissed him, letting her body speak where language failed. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Clara's window like a cruel reminder. She woke alone, the space beside her empty but still warm with Jesse's presence. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if it had all been a fever dream, the kisses, the whispered confessions, the reckless abandon. Then she caught the faint scent of him on her skin and knew it had been very real. Through the window, Clara saw Jesse already at work in the yard. His shirt was off again, muscles moving smoothly as he repaired the gate damaged by the winter floods. Everything looked the same as yesterday, but everything had changed. When Clara went to the kitchen, she found fresh coffee already brewed and biscuits warming on the stove. A note in Jesse's careful hand lay beside them. Eat something. That's an order, Jay. Despite herself, she smiled. Then the sound of approaching horses made the smile vanish. Peering through the window, she saw Judge Juan riding toward the house with Sheriff Boyd and 2 other men. Jesse saw them too, straightening from his work. He didn't run, though he had to know why they'd come. He simply stood, waiting, tall and steady as a mountain. Clara's heart pounded as she grabbed her shawl and rushed outside. Judge Juan, she greeted coolly. What brings you here? The judge dismounted heavily, his face flushed from the ride. Checking on the prisoner, Mrs. Whitmore, he said, voice too smooth. We've had reports. Clara's eyes narrowed. Reports of what? That you've been ill. That Kane here has been taking liberties. His gaze was sharp, full of insinuation. Heat flooded Clara's face, though she kept her voice steady. I had a fever. Mr. Kane helped with chores I couldn't manage. Hardly improper. Some say he's been sleeping in your house, Boyd said with a smirk. On the parlor settee, Clara snapped. After someone shot at us last week. Surely you've heard of that. The judge's eyes sharpened. No one reported any shooting. Because I can't prove who did it. Clara's voice rose, fierce and cutting. But someone killed 3 of my cattle and then tried to kill us. Mr. Kane moved to the house for security. Would you rather he let me be murdered? The judge shifted uncomfortably. Of course not. But appearances matter, Mrs. Whitmore. Perhaps it would be best if Kane finished his sentence elsewhere. No. The word came out like a gunshot, sharper than Clara intended. Judge Juan blinked, startled. He's bound to me for 6 months, Clara said coldly. That was the agreement. Agreements can be modified if circumstances. The circumstances, Clara interrupted, stepping closer, are that someone is trying to drive me off my land, and now you want to take away the one person helping me hold it. Why is that, Judge? Juan's face flushed dark red. You're overwrought, Mrs. Whitmore. Clearly. Your recent illness. My illness is past. My mind is clear. Clara's green eyes blazed with fury. And I know my rights under territorial law. She stood so near Jesse now that her shoulder brushed his arm, a deliberate statement. Mr. Kane stays until his sentence is complete, unless you have legal grounds to change that. The judge's jaw worked. Finally, he snapped. No legal grounds, but I urge you to consider your reputation. My reputation, Clara said, lifting her chin, is my concern, not yours. Is there anything else? She asked icily. The judge remounted with poor grace. We'll be back to check again. And Kane. He shot Jesse a hard look. Mind yourself. The territory has a short rope for convicts who forget their place. As they rode away, Clara realized she was shaking. You shouldn't have challenged him like that, Jesse said quietly, standing a careful distance away. It'll make things harder for you. Things are already hard, Clara muttered, wrapping her arms around herself. She turned to him suddenly. Jesse, about last night. It was a mistake, he said flatly, cutting her off. You were feverish, not thinking straight. We'll forget it happened. The words struck Clara like ice water. Is that what you want, to forget? She asked, voice cracking. What I want doesn't matter. Jesse wouldn't meet her eyes. The judge is right. I forgot my place. It won't happen again. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing alone in the yard, tears burning her throat. Clara understood what he was doing, protecting her reputation, sacrificing himself to keep her safe. Noble, honorable, Jesse. But Clara was done with noble, done with honorable, done with everyone else deciding what was best for her. That night, Clara made her choice. She waited until full dark, then slipped silently to the barn. Jesse lay in the loft, staring at the ceiling, fully dressed but clearly awake. Go back to the house, Clara, he said without looking at her. No. She climbed the ladder, determination blazing in her eyes. You don't get to decide for both of us. Clara, I'm not feverish now, she interrupted. I'm not confused. I know exactly what I want. He sat up, anguish and desire warring on his face. And when the whole town knows, when they shun you completely, then I'll have something real to sustain me through their shunning, Clara said fiercely. I've been proper my whole life, a proper daughter, a proper wife, a proper widow. And what has it gotten me? An empty house and vultures circling. You deserve better than this, Jesse whispered. Clara silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her frustration, longing, and defiance into it. For a moment, he resisted. Then his control shattered. He crushed her against him, his hands tangling in her hair, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that stole her breath. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Stop telling me what I deserve, Clara gasped. Start asking what I want. What do you want? Jesse asked, voice ragged. You, she said simply. For whatever time we have. Is that so wrong? His answer was wordless. He drew her down beside him on the hay, his touch infinitely tender, as if she were both fragile and sacred. No, he said finally, voice rough. Not wrong, maybe the only right thing in this whole cursed mess. They came together in the soft hay, surrounded by the quiet night, the rustle of horses in their stalls, the mournful call of owls, the eternal whisper of desert wind. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't polite. It was two people who'd been alone too long, finding solace and connection in each other, if only for this moment stolen from a hostile world. Afterward, Clara lay with her head on Jesse's chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. No regrets? He asked softly. None, she said without hesitation. Except what? Except that I can't give you more, Clara admitted. A real life. A future. You're giving me now, Jesse murmured, brushing a kiss over her hair. That's enough. But even as he said it, Clara knew it wasn't true. She wanted everything a future, a life built openly. A world where Jesse wasn't her prisoner but her partner. News of their affair spread through town faster than wildfire in a dry season. By the time Clara rode in for supplies 3 days later, she could feel the weight of every stare, hear the venom in every whisper. Women she'd known for years crossed the street to avoid her. Men looked at her with a mix of contempt and ugly speculation. At the mercantile, Mrs. Henderson served her in icy silence, practically slamming Clara's purchases onto the counter. As Clara loaded her wagon, a voice rang out, sharp and vicious. Clara Whitmore. Clara turned slowly. Sarah Morrison, Sam Morrison's widow, stood across the street, dressed in ostentatious mourning black, her face twisted with rage. I heard you took my husband's killer as your lover. Sarah spat. Have you no shame? No decency? Clara froze, every eye in the street fixed on her. A crowd was gathering, eager for blood. I'm sorry for your loss, Clara said quietly, though her voice trembled with fury. Sorry? Sarah shrieked. You're betting the man who murdered my husband? And you're sorry? Your husband wasn't the man you thought he was, Clara said, her voice hardening. Sarah's face went white, then scarlet. How dare you? Ask yourself why Jesse Kane killed him, Clara interrupted, her voice ringing clear over the crowd's murmurs. Ask yourself what happened to Jesse's 17-year-old sister while she worked in your house. Lies, Sarah screamed, hysteria twisting her features. Filthy lies to justify your wanton behavior. The truth, Clara said simply, though I doubt you want to hear it. Clara turned her back on Sarah, ready to leave before her anger spilled over. But Sarah wasn't finished. You're a disgrace, she screamed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. A harlot! No decent woman will speak to you again. Clara looked down at the woman's hand, gripping her arm, nails digging painfully into her skin. Then she met Sarah's wild eyes and spoke with icy calm. Then I'll enjoy the quiet. She wrenched free and climbed onto her wagon. As she drove away, someone spit in the dust behind her. Clara kept her head high, but her hands trembled on the reins. When she reached the ranch, Jesse was waiting on the porch, his face grim. He'd obviously heard already bad news traveled faster than wildfire in a drought. You shouldn't have defended me, he said quietly as she dismounted. Someone had to, Clara snapped. Exhaustion, turning her voice brittle. That woman lived under the same roof as her husband's victims and pretends ignorance. Maybe she truly didn't know, Jesse said, though his tone was skeptical. Or maybe she didn't want to know. Clara began unloading supplies with sharp, jerky movements, needing something physical to anchor her. There's a difference, she muttered. When Jesse reached for a crate at the same time, their hands brushed. The simple touch sent heat rushing through her veins, a dangerous reminder of the nights they'd shared since that first time in the barn. Clara. Jesse's voice was soft, pained. This is only going to get worse. I know. Then why? His voice cracked. Why keep fighting? Because I'm tired of lies, Clara said fiercely, spinning to face him. Tired of pretending. The town wants to paint me as a fallen woman? Fine. At least now I'm falling for something worthwhile. Her words silenced him. That evening, they sat together on the porch, the setting sun painting the mountains blood red. Jesse played his harmonica while Clara mended a torn shirt. To anyone passing by, they might have looked like a long-married couple, peaceful and domestic. But every note of Jesse's music carried the weight of time ticking down between them. 2 more months, Clara said quietly, setting her needle aside. Jesse's song faltered, then stopped entirely. Don't, he said hoarsely. We can't ignore it forever. We can try. His jaw tightened. Jesse, Clara's voice broke. What happened in town today, and will keep happening until they break me or I bend. And I won't bend. I know. He reached for her hand, his rough thumb tracing slow, soothing circles across her palm. It's one of the things I love about you. The word hung between them like a live spark. You love me? Clara whispered. Jesse went very still, as if he could undo the admission by freezing in place. Since the moment you pointed that rifle at me, he said finally. Probably before. Probably from the second I heard your name. Clara's throat ached with unshed tears. I have no right to love you, Jesse continued, his voice rough. I'm a convict, a killer, a man with no future to offer. But Clara, you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to want tomorrow to come. You foolish, beautiful man, Clara whispered, tears spilling at last. Don't you know, I love you too. He made a sound like a wounded animal and pulled her into his arms. They clung together as the sky darkened. 2 people who'd found each other too late, in the wrong circumstances, against all odds. Run away with me, Jesse said suddenly, desperate. When my sentence is done, we'll leave this place. California, Oregon, somewhere they don't know us. Start fresh. And leave my land? Clara whispered. Yes. Let them have it. Let us win, Clara. His hands framed her face, his gray eyes burning. What's more important? This piece of dirt? Or our chance at happiness? Clara's heart twisted. She wanted to say yes, wanted to throw caution aside and chase the dream of freedom. But she shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. This land is all I have left of Thomas. Of the life we built. I can't just abandon it. Can't, Jessie said bitterly. Or won't. Both. She touched his face with trembling fingers. I love you, Jessie. But I will not be driven off what's mine. Not by Sullivan. Not by Morrison's company. Not by the town's judgment. Stubborn woman, Jessie growled, then kissed her fiercely. A clash of defiance and need. They made love on the porch beneath the emerging stars, reckless and wild, claiming whatever happiness they could snatch from a hostile world. Afterward, lying in his arms as the night air cooled their heated skin, Clara felt a new defiance rise inside her. I want to go to town tomorrow, she said suddenly. Jessie tensed. Why? To show them they haven't broken me. Supplies, business, and a message. She sat up, pulling her loosened dress around her. Will you come with me? You know what that'll look like, Jessie said darkly. Me, riding beside you, openly. Yes, Clara said. It'll make everything worse. Or it'll make it honest. I'm tired of you sleeping in the barn, Jessie. Tired of pretending we're just employer and laborer. If they're going to condemn me anyway, let it be for the truth. You're asking me to move into the house. I'm asking you to stop hiding what we are to each other. Jessie studied her face in the moonlight, troubled and awed. And when my sentence ends? When I have to leave? Then, at least we'll have had these months without shame. Finally, Jessie nodded, his voice barely a whisper. All right, but Clara, once we do this, there's no going back. The town already thinks the worst, she said fiercely. Let them see they're right. The next morning, Jessie moved his few belongings into the house. It should have felt momentous, but instead, it felt right, natural. His shirts hanging beside her dresses, his boots by the door, his shaving kit on the washstand. Small signs of a shared life, of a house that no longer felt empty. They rode to town together, sitting side by side on the wagon seat. Clara wore her best dress, chin high, every line of her body radiating defiance. Jessie had shaved carefully, his clothes clean and pressed. They looked almost respectable, almost. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-word. Women pulled their children close. Men stepped into the street to stare openly. By the time Clara reached the mercantile, it felt like the entire town had gathered to witness her public defiance. Mrs. Henderson tried to refuse them service. We don't serve your kind here, she sneered. My money spends the same as anyone's, Clara said calmly. And last I checked, this was still a public establishment. Not for long, someone muttered darkly. Clara ignored them, moving through her shopping list, while Jessie carried her purchases with quiet dignity. He opened doors for her, helped her into the wagon, all the small courtesies of a man with his woman, performed under 100 burning gazes. It was at the bank that the true blow came. Clara had gone to discuss her accounts, but Mr. Holcomb, the oily bank manager, kept her waiting for an hour before finally admitting her. I'm afraid we're calling in your loan, Mrs. Whitmore, he said smoothly. Clara froze. What loan? The ranch is paid clear. The operating loan your late husband took for improvements, Holcomb explained, his false smile widening. $300. Due in full within 30 days. Clara's blood ran cold. Thomas never mentioned. Perhaps he didn't want to worry you, Holcomb interrupted silkily. Of course, if you were to sell the property, the debt would be easily cleared. Let me guess, Clara said through clenched teeth. Mr. Wheeler's offer still stands? Indeed, Holcomb said, folding his hands. Understanding crashed over Clara like icy water. You're in on it, she breathed. The bank, the mining company, all of you. Holcomb's smile didn't falter. I don't know what you mean. I'm simply protecting the bank's interests. You're destroying me. Clara's voice rang with fury. My morals have nothing to do with my ability to pay, don't they? Holcomb leaned back, smug and calculating. How much longer do you think decent folks will buy your cattle, do business with you? You're ruining yourself, Mrs. Whitmore. And for what? A convicted killer who'll abandon you the moment he's free. 30 days? Clara said coldly. You said 30 days. She turned on her heel and stalked out, head high. Though inside she was shaking. Jesse was waiting by the wagon. His face darkened as he read her expression. What happened? Clara told him everything as they drove away, the words bitter in her mouth. By the time she finished, Jesse's jaw was set like stone. I have some money saved, he said roughly. Not much, but no. The refusal was immediate. Sharp. I won't take your money. Our money, Jesse corrected, his eyes fierce. Clara, we're in this together now. Are we? The question slipped out before she could stop it. In 6 weeks, you'll be free to go. Why would you stay with a woman who's lost everything? Jesse pulled the wagon to a halt, right there in the road, turning to face her fully. Is that what you think? He demanded. That I'm with you for your land, your prosperity? Clara's throat closed. I think you're with me, because the law forces you to be here. The law? Jesse laughed, short and bitter. Clara, the law could hang me tomorrow, and I'd still choose to spend tonight in your arms. The law could free me this instant, and I'd still be yours until my last breath. Pretty words, Clara whispered, afraid to believe. Jesse silenced her with a kiss, hard and possessive. When he pulled back, his gray eyes blazed like storm clouds. Not words, he said fiercely. Truth. You want to know why I'd stay? Jesse's voice was fierce, breaking the silence of the road. Because you are the strongest, most stubborn, most magnificent woman I've ever known. Because you make me want to be better than I am. Because I love you so much it feels like drowning, and I'd rather drown than breathe without you. Clara's tears spilled freely now, the sheer power of his words melting her fear. Jesse, we'll find the money, he vowed, cupping her face in his calloused hands. We'll save your ranch, our ranch. And when my sentence ends, the only leaving I'll do is if you tell me to go. Never, Clara whispered. I'll never let you go. They clung to each other in the middle of the dusty road, while overhead a hawk circled against the endless blue sky. Free, wild, untouchable. That night, lying in their shared bed, Clara stared at the ceiling, her mind whirling. The cattle might bring $100, if she could find buyers willing to defy the town's hatred. The horses, maybe 50 more. Her mother's jewelry, hidden since Thomas's death, could fetch 75 in Tucson. Still short, still not enough. What are you thinking? Jesse asked softly, his hand finding hers in the darkness. Numbers, Clara admitted. Money. How to make something from nothing. We'll find a way, he promised. And if we don't? She whispered. What if they win? He rolled toward her, gathering her against his chest. Then we start over somewhere else. Together. That's not losing, Clara. That's choosing what matters most. You'd really come with me? She asked, tears in her voice. If I lost everything, I'd follow you to hell itself, Jesse said fiercely. If you'd have me. Clara silenced him with a kiss, slow and aching. They made love like it was the last night they'd ever have, savoring every touch, every breath. At dawn, Clara rose carefully, unwilling to wake him, but before her feet touched the floor, a strange silence struck her, a silence broken by the frantic whinnying of terrified horses. Then, the shots rang out. Crack! 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 Clara froze, horror flooding her veins as the sound of screaming horses filled the morning air. Jesse! She screamed. He was already on his feet, pulling her to the floor as more shots tore through the air. But the bullets weren't aimed at them. They were aimed at the corral. Clara stumbled to the window just in time to see one of their finest mares crumple, blood pooling beneath her. No, Clara's scream was raw, animal. She bolted for the door, but Jesse caught her, holding her back as 2 more horses fell. By the time the shooting stopped, 5 of their 8 horses lay dead. The survivors screamed and thrashed in terror, the corral a scene of carnage. "Bastards," Jesse snarled, his voice shaking with rage. "Cowardly, spineless bastards." Clara stood frozen, her hands over her mouth, her entire world crashing down. Those horses were worth $200 at least, money they desperately needed. More than that, they were living creatures, murdered for spite. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "We're already beaten. Why this?" "Because they can." Jesse's voice was cold as a winter storm. "Because they want to be sure you're not just bent, but broken." "Something?" "Inside," Clara snapped. All the fear, all the careful planning, all the fragile hope, dissolved in a white-hot wave of fury. "Saddle the remaining horses," she said, her voice like steel. Jesse turned to her, wary. "What are you planning?" "We're going to town," Clara hissed. "To the sheriff." "Clara, you know he won't." "I know he won't help." She cut him off. "But I want it on record. I want everyone to see what they've done." She snatched up a grain sack and began stuffing it with evidence. Threatening, letters, forged documents, Wheeler's offers to buy her land. "And then," she said darkly, "we're going to the newspaper. The local paper won't print it." "No," Clara agreed, "but the territorial paper in Tucson might. They've been sniffing around the mining companies for months." Her eyes blazed. "If they want to play with fire, let them burn." That night, they rode to town under cover of darkness, leading a 3rd horse loaded with the grain sacks full of damning proof. When they reached the sheriff's office, Boyd tried to slam the door in their faces, but Clara raised her voice, sharp as a rifle shot, loud enough for half the town to hear. "5 horses shot dead on my property, Sheriff. Are you going to investigate? Or should I wire the territorial governor directly?" Boyd froze, his face twisting with fury as curious townsfolk gathered outside. He had no choice but to take her statement, though his reluctance was obvious. Within an hour, a crowd had formed. Some came to gape, others to glare. But Clara noticed a few troubled faces among them, doubt creeping in. Judge Juan arrived, pushing through the mob like a man expecting victory. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said smoothly, "these are serious accusations." "Yes," Clara agreed coldly. "Very serious. Murder of livestock, arson, attempted murder, conspiracy to defraud." "You have no proof," the judge sneered. "I have dates, times, witnesses," Clara shot back, holding up her documents. "I have a pattern of harassment any honest lawman would investigate." "Are you calling me dishonest?" Sheriff Boyd blustered, his face purple. "I'm calling you exactly what you are," Clara said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Bought and paid for." A murmur rippled through the onlookers, some shocked, others nodding grimly. "That's slander," Judge Juan snapped. "I could have you arrested." "Try it," Jesse said quietly, stepping forward like a storm, gathering strength. "Put her in jail for speaking the truth. See how that plays in Tucson when the newspapers get hold of it." "You threatening me, convict?" Juan barked. "No." Jesse's voice was deadly calm. "I'm promising you. You hurt her. If you hurt her, if you try to silence her, I'll make Morrison's death look like mercy." The crowd went utterly still. Clara grabbed Jesse's arm, feeling the violent tension vibrating through him. "No threats," she said softly. Then louder, for all to hear. "We're leaving now, Sheriff. You have my statement. Do with it what your conscience allows if you have one." As they pushed through the crowd, a hand caught Clara's sleeve. Maria Santos, her face pale but determined, leaned close. "The old mine road," she whispered urgently. "Dawn. Day after tomorrow. Bring the papers." Before Clara could respond, Maria vanished back into the crowd like a ghost. They rode home in tense silence, Jesse constantly scanning behind them for pursuit. "What do you think she meant?" Clara asked finally. "Maybe she knows someone who'll take your story to Tucson," Jesse said grimly. "Or maybe it's a trap." He checked his rifle, then handed Clara her pistol. "Either way, we'll be ready." The next day, they prepared relentlessly. Clara organized the documents, making careful copies of the most damning evidence and hiding them in multiple places. Jesse buried weapons and money around the property, escaped caches if they had to run. Neither spoke of his approaching release date, now only days away. But the knowledge hung between them like a blade. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She wandered to the remains of the barn, staring at the makeshift stalls Jesse had built after the fire. Even working alone, he had created something solid and functional, a testament to his skill and determination. Couldn't sleep either. Jesse's voice came from behind her, low and warm. She turned, finding him silhouetted in the doorway, rifle slung across his shoulder. "Too much thinking," she admitted with a weary smile. "That'll do it." He moved to stand beside her, close enough to feel his heat. "Clara," he said softly, "if something goes wrong tomorrow, nothing will go wrong. But if it does," she silenced him with a kiss, fierce and desperate. "Then we face it together," she said against his lips. "That's what we do now. Face things together. For 3 more days," he whispered. "For always," she corrected, gripping his hands. "Whether you're here, or at Hendrick's ranch, or 100 miles away, we're connected now. Nothing can change that." Jesse's answer was another kiss, tender and aching. Dawn came too soon. They rode out under a fading moon, stars winking out as the sky lightened. The old mine road wound through jagged canyons, shadows stretching like fingers across the path. Jesse's rifle rested across his saddle, his eyes scanning constantly for danger. But when they reached the meeting point, it wasn't enemies waiting. It was allies. Maria Santos stood with 6 other women, their faces pale but resolute. Among them were Ruth Williams and others. Clara didn't recognize mothers, sisters, friends of Morrison's victims. And with them was a well-dressed man with sharp eyes and ink-stained fingers. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, tipping his hat. "James Fletcher, Tucson Herald. These brave ladies suggested I might find a story worth telling out here." Clara looked at the women, these survivors who had risked everything to come. Her heart swelled with gratitude and sorrow. "Mr. Fletcher," she said, "how much truth can your paper handle?" The journalist's smile was thin and sharp. "Try me." As the sun crested the canyon walls, Clara began to speak. Her voice was steady, but each word carried years of pain and fury. She told Fletcher everything: Morrison's unspeakable crimes, Jesse's act of justice, the town's willful blindness, and the relentless campaign to steal her land. The women stepped forward one by one, adding their own stories. Some trembled as they spoke, but their voices didn't falter. Ruth Williams told of her daughter's suffering. Maria Santos told of threats whispered in the night. For the first time, the darkness surrounding Morrison's empire was dragged into the open. Fletcher scribbled furiously, his ink-stained fingers flying. "This will cause a firestorm," he warned. "The mining company has powerful friends." "Good," Clara said, her green eyes blazing. "Let it burn." When they finished, Fletcher carefully packed away his notes. "The story will run in 3 days," he said gravely. "I suggest you be prepared for backlash." Clara only nodded. She had been ready for this war a long time. As the group prepared to leave, Ruth approached Clara. "We're grateful," she said softly, "for your courage, for your man's justice. Whatever happens now, at least the truth has been spoken." Clara squeezed her hand, heart aching. "Go home," she urged. "Stay safe. I'll carry the rest." She and Jesse rode home, braced for the storm they knew was coming. It arrived that very evening. Judge Juan rode up with Sheriff Boyd and 6 armed men. Their silhouettes were stark against the blood-red sunset, like vultures descending. Clara met them on the porch, Jesse at her side. "Jesse Kane," the judge announced with relish. "You're under arrest." "For what?" Clara demanded. "Threatening a judge. Conspiracy to commit murder." Juan's smile was cold and triumphant. "Take your pick." His sentence was commuted, not pardoned. Any criminal act revokes that mercy. "You have no proof," Clara shouted. "I have my own testimony," Juan sneered. "That's enough," the judge gestured. "Take him." Jesse stepped forward before the deputies could grab him. "No need for force," he said evenly. "I'll come peaceful." "No," Clara cried, clutching his arm. Jesse turned to her, his storm-gray eyes burning into hers. "Remember your promise," he said softly. "You will let them take me." "I won't let them." "Yes, you will." He kissed her hard, swift, final. Then he turned away before she could see the tears in his eyes. "Take care of her." He told no one in particular. "She's worth more than all of us combined." The men shackled him and loaded him onto a horse. Clara stood frozen, watching them steal the man she loved. Judge Juan lingered, savoring her agony. "His trial is set for tomorrow," he said with false courtesy. "Quick justice in these parts. You're welcome to attend, though I doubt you'll like the outcome." "You can't do this," Clara hissed. "When the newspaper story comes out." "What story?" Juan interrupted smoothly. "Accidents happen on the road to Tucson. Bandits, rattlesnakes, broken wagon wheels. All sorts of dangers for a man traveling alone." Ice flooded Clara's veins. "Fletcher," Juan tipped his hat mockingly. "I'm sure he's fine. Probably decided the story wasn't worth telling after all." He rode away with his men, leaving Clara alone on the porch, Jesse's kiss still burning on her lips, his absence already an aching void. Clara didn't cry. Instead, she went inside and began loading every gun in the house. If they thought they'd broken her, they were wrong. A cornered woman with nothing left to lose was the most dangerous creature in the territory. Tomorrow, she would go to that trial. And God help anyone who tried to stop her. Before dawn, Clara rode into the wild canyon lands, following a hidden path Thomas had shown her years ago. At a secluded, abandoned Apache camp, she cached half their remaining money, along with ammunition and supplies. If everything went wrong tomorrow, she'd have what she needed to fight or to flee. By sunrise, she was on a ridge overlooking town, watching the streets come alive. The trial was set for 10 o'clock, and crowds were already gathering. Public hangings drew spectators like flies to carrion, and everyone knew this trial would end at the gallows. But Clara had one last card to play. She rode not to the courthouse, but to the telegraph office at the edge of town. Timothy Banks, the young telegraph operator, went pale when he saw her. "Mrs. Whitmore, I can't," they said, "if anyone." "Tim," Clara said sharply, leaning across the counter. "Your sister Emma worked in the Morrison house, didn't she? Before she left town so suddenly." The boy swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." Clara pulled out a pre-written message and slammed it onto the counter. "Send this to the territorial governor's office in Tucson. Now. And I'll forget I ever wondered why Emma fled." Tim read the message, his face turning chalk white. It was brief but devastating. "Judge Whelan conducting illegal trial, stop. No jury, stop. Witnesses threatened, stop. Request immediate intervention, stop Clara Whitmore. They'll know it was me," Tim whispered. "They'll kill me." "Not if you leave town immediately after," Clara said coldly. She pushed a pouch of gold coins across the counter. "Enough to get you and Emma somewhere safe." "For a heartbeat," the boy hesitated. Then something in Clara's expression, fierce, unbreakable, decided him. He began tapping out the message, hands shaking. When he finished, he grabbed the coins and fled without looking back. Clara rode to the courthouse. The street outside was packed, the atmosphere grotesquely festive. Vendors hawked food and drink, as if it were a fair, not a man's life on the line. Inside, the courtroom was stifling, every seat taken. Jesse sat at the defendant's table, shackled and bruised, but unbowed. His eyes found hers instantly. She saw love there and warning. Judge Juan presided like a king over his domain, smug and untouchable. "This court is now in session," he declared, his gavel cracking like a pistol shot. "The Territory versus Jesse Kane, charged with threatening a judge and conspiracy to commit murder." "Where's his lawyer?" Clara shouted. "The defendant has waived counsel." Juan sneered. "I have not," Jesse said clearly. "Your wants are irrelevant, convict." Juan snapped. "This court has testimony that you threatened my life. That's sufficient for." The doors burst open with a thunderous crash. A tall, weathered man strode in, his badge gleaming. "Deputy U.S. Marshal." "This trial is suspended," he barked, his voice carrying over the stunned crowd. By order of the territorial governor. Chaos erupted. People shouted. Boyd tried to draw his gun. The marshal didn't even flinch. You have no authority here, Juan thundered. Don't I? The marshal produced official papers, his eyes cold. The governor received a very interesting telegram this morning, followed by an even more interesting visit from a newspaperman who'd been waylaid on the road to Tucson. Clara's heart leapt. Fletcher, she whispered. He'd survived. That newspaperman, the marshal continued, had quite a story to tell about corruption, conspiracy, and attempted murder. This is my courtroom, Juan roared, pounding his gavel uselessly. Was your courtroom? The marshal corrected. James Whelan, you are under arrest for corruption, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Sheriff Boyd, you too. And we'll be speaking with every man who had a hand in this scheme. The room erupted in chaos. Boyd tried to run but was tackled by deputies. Juan sat, frozen, as shackles were snapped onto his wrists, the same shackles that had bound Jesse. Several of the judge's allies slipped out the back, no doubt racing to warn others. The marshal crossed to Jesse and unlocked his chains. You're free, he said simply. Jesse didn't move. Not until he reached Clara. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he'd never let go. How? He choked out against her hair. Tim Banks sent the telegram, Clara explained breathlessly. And Fletcher. He made it through. She touched Jesse's bruised face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Your face. Nothing that won't heal, he said with a shaky laugh. Clara, you took an awful risk. You took one for your sister, she replied fiercely. Seems fair, I'd take one for you. The marshal approached with solemn dignity. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, I'll need statements from both of you. But first. He handed Clara an official-looking document. This came with the governor's orders. Clara unfolded it, breath-catching. It was a full pardon for Jesse Kane. Pardoned, she whispered, hardly daring to believe. Free and clear, ma'am, the marshal confirmed. The governor was disturbed by Fletcher's story. Seems Morrison had victims in Tucson too, including the governor's own cousin. His voice darkened. Should have been stopped years ago. Jesse stared at the pardon, his hands trembling. Free, he said, wonder in his voice. I'm free. And there's more, the marshal continued grimly. That bank loan they tried to hold over you? Fraudulent. Thomas Whitmore never signed any such papers. Boyd's deputy is singing like a bird, says they forged the documents after your husband died. Clara's knees gave way. Jesse caught her, holding her upright as relief and exhaustion overwhelmed her. You don't owe a cent, the marshal finished. Clara clung to Jesse, sobbing with delayed terror and joy. It's over, Jesse whispered against her hair. It's finally over. But it wasn't entirely over. Not yet. The cleanup took days. The marshal's men arrested over a dozen people tied to the conspiracy, including Wheeler and several mining company executives. Jake Sullivan fled the territory before they could catch him, but his ranch was seized, his assets frozen. Fletcher's article ran not just in Tucson, but across the country, picked up by major papers. Headlines screamed of corruption and courage. Widow exposes criminal empire territory rocked by scandal. The women who had risked speaking out were vindicated at last. Some found peace in the truth being known. Others, like Ruth Williams, used settlement money to start new lives far away. Maria Santos opened a boarding house for young women, a safe haven where no predator could touch them. And through it all, Jesse stayed by Clara's side. Not because the law bound him, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because he chose to. Every morning, Clara woke to find him there, real and warm and hers. A week after the trial, they stood on their land, surveying the damage. The barn was gone, the corral blood-stained, their herd decimated, but they had survived. Together. We could start over somewhere else, Jesse said quietly. This place holds a lot of bad memories. Clara looked at the scarred earth, then at him. This is where we fell in love, she said simply. Where we fought, side by side. I don't want to run from those memories. Jesse pulled her into his arms. Then we rebuild. Together. Always.